Wow. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Richard Gassman, currently at the University of Bath. A nuclear weapon-free world has to be something more than simply a world where all the nuclear weapons have gone. For a nuclear weapon-free world to be sustainable, it has to be a world that's more stable and more secure than it is today, or else it's impossible to sustain. So what else is it we have to do other than simply destroy the nuclear weapons to make that a sustainable objective?
Richard, you saw a list up there of things we put in our Wall Street Journal editorial in the first one, and of course that's not all inclusive, but those are the big sweeps. You're exactly right. In my view, the way I've expressed it, and a couple of my Russian friends have expressed it the same way, is that a world without nuclear weapons is not today's world simply subtracting nuclear weapons. You've got to change people's hearts and minds and apprehensions and fears and distrust in numerous regions around the world. We had one on the list, the two things that are the most difficult were toward the end of the list. One is bearing down on regional conflicts, because the whole globe has a stake in these regional conflicts. This is not simply a matter of sovereignty. There was a recent article in American Scientific magazine that had done a huge amount of supercomputer work, taking the hypothetical of 100 weapons going off between India and Pakistan and looking at the result. And the result, according to this article and according to this scientific study, was a couple of 100 million people killed immediately with 100 weapons, but 1 billion people dying over the next 5 years because of starvation, because of the effect of blocking out the sun. So this is not simply a sovereign question. We're talking about whether we are going to have the existence, we're talking about the future of God's world. I mean, in the existence of mankind here. That's the stakes. And while we've greatly reduced the chances of an all-out war between the United States and Russia, we still are postured in a way where an accident or a mistake could really set off something nobody intended. And that is, in this day and world, ridiculous. So we've got to set an example between the United States, Russia, and NATO. And a lot of that's being discussed right now with missile defense cooperation, which I think if we could get it done would be a game changer. I think it would change the whole psychology. Mm-hmm. But the world's got a stake in what happens in India and Pakistan. The world has a stake in what happens in the Middle East. And so we've got to deal with these regional conflicts. And I would add one other thing that was on that list that may be the most, one of the most difficult will be, and that is verification and enforcement. We've got to be able to verify for the world to have confidence. We've got to be able to verify not just weapons, but nuclear materials. We've got to secure those materials, and we've got to know that we've secured them. That's enormously important. Great Britain and Norway have a verification study going on right now. They're doing a lot of intensive work. Very important. Our foundation has a lot of work going on verification, but also enforcement. When you have an Iran and North Korea, I call these avalanches coming down the mountain that we're trying to climb. When you have those countries like that, the world has to have the political will to have them comply. That's not easy, but we've yet to demonstrate we have that. So all of these things have to be on the list of steps that are essential.
Besides, I think it's also true that the more unstable the world is, the more important it is not to have nuclear weapons around. Granting that instability will be a reason why some countries want them, it is also a reason to try to stop them.
One other point of view on that is even if all of the problems of the world are not solved, is to understand that nuclear weapons don't necessarily serve as a deterrent to the issues you're dealing with. From the American point of view, they were not sufficient to deter the Korean War. They were not sufficient to deter the Vietnam War. We faced those anyway, even though we had an overwhelming superiority of nuclear weapons. From Russia's point of view, all they had to do was observe that they did not prevent the Soviet Union from collapsing, absolutely collapsing. Nuclear weapons had nothing to do with that. So it's also important to understand the limitations of nuclear weapons. People tend to place too much importance, too much credence on them.
So, and then go ahead.